right? And I believe that most of those stars out there, including our very own sun, is a gathering place for souls. And of course, you can't burn when you don't have a body, and you can fly and you can float and you can move. But what a great vibration that is. And when I think of the sun, for instance, our very own sun, it is a relay station of God here. And the light that it represents, it shines and warms. I mean, without the sun, that's it here for Earth, for us. And so it is the local life giver.
My guest today is Stephen Poplin. Stephen was born on All Souls Day, so it may have been a cosmic setup. He had a spontaneous mystical experience at 21, then the search began. After attending 6 universities in the US and Europe, Stephen received his BA in philosophy and MA in humanities, which was comparative religions focus, from Old Dominion University in Virginia. He has been a college instructor in several campuses on both US coasts as well as in Germany. He is a trained hypnotherapist and spiritual counselor with an international clientele. His professional specialties are focused upon personal and social improvement through self-awareness, spiritual trance-like journeys, and past life regressions. He studied with Michael Newton and so expanded into life between lives integration sessions. His mission is to spark inner awakenings. Stephen, I am so blessed to have you as my guest today. You've done some great work in the spiritual community and continue to do so, and have had some amazing experiences as well.
Thank you, Tia. Thanks for the invitation.
For sure. Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. Um, so my viewers are interested in spiritually transformative and near-death experiences, and you've had some of those. Do you mind starting out by telling us about those?
Sure, sure. You had already mentioned that when I was 21, I had this mystical experience. And I thought at the time that that really kind of started things, but I can actually go back when I was 17. And I was, in bed sleeping one night, and suddenly I woke up and I was on the ceiling and looking down at my body and totally confused. I thought, what the heck is this? This should not be happening. And then rose a certain kind of panic because this was not supposed to happen, you know. Uh, and so then I kind of like focused and concentrated, and to the point where um, once I returned into my body, I was sweating, and I said, must that type of exertion, even though I thought it was more like a dream kind of exertion, but it was really an effort that I had to get back into the body. And unfortunately, I didn't know at the time that that would have been a great opportunity to take off, into outer space and to have a great flight and start to explore in those areas. So oh, fast forward then to when I was 21, I was in Colorado, and I was just minding my own business and walking through a park, and it was a nice day, kind of sunny. I can't remember if it was spring or something, but it was definitely, warm. And suddenly the leaves started to glisten, and the grass started to vibrate. And and with that came this peacefulness, an exhilaration. First of all, it was very visually beautiful, but then again, another kind of like, so what is going on now? And a little did I know that, as I would describe it later, it felt like a little bit of fairy dust, being sprinkled over the top of my head. And evidently that year of 21 was supposed to be very important. And indeed, wasn't until years later when I became a hypnotherapist and I helped many, many people to go into past lives that then I started to pick up that there are certain times and ages in past lives when something very significant happened, like someone died, or there was um, a loss of a love, or being lost on some sort of adventure, and it happened at a particular age. And I found out later that what happened to me in a past life was that there was a, a feeling of an educational direction that I wanted to go, and the doors closed at age 21, and I go, "Ah, well, that's the end of that." And then I was kind of lost for a while in this past life in Europe. And so uh, that set the stage then for Stephen Poplin today, age 21, minding his own business, walking in a park in Colorado, and boom, the door opens up at the same age that it closed in a past life. It's like, so there's these patterns that I'm always very curious about, always looking for patterns. Mentioned that I was born on All Souls Day, taking a look at souls. And I'd have to say that through my 40 years of working with many clients, helping them to get out of the body into a spiritual level and to explore not only past lives, but also in the life between life arena, one's soul groups and educational places like a great university, vibrational orbs. And that's one of the reasons why I've got this little background going on here of planetary experiences, other dimensional awarenesses, collecting understanding, growth, almost like having a metaphysical university on the other side of the earth plane, learning our lessons, and then coming back, being reincarnated into our bodies, and then off we go. And then periodically, a certain age will come up, and boom, something happens, and we're off on a new stage. A variation of that was a client who met her husband when she was 39. And when I took her into a past life, she was in Persia, and she was a very unusual woman who was a bit more of a teacher, of a prophet, and women weren't really supposed to be so forthright and know-it-alls and so forth. So she had issues with the culture. However, her husband was also a minister, and so they created a very nice team as a teaching duet. And then he died of a heart attack when she was 39. And then the problems came in her life that, well, who is this woman? Who does she think she is? And she didn't have the protection of her husband at that point, even though it was a plan in spirit before that life that, okay, you will meet, you will be teachers, you will do this as a dyad, as a couple. This is part of your mission to do that. And at some point, he will leave you, and then you will carry on your mission on your own. Well, it did not carry on very well because she was in a difficult social community that would not really allow women um, to shine, to teach, to tell them what to do. So, but she needed to learn that. It was like a hard lesson. And I think she only lasted maybe another 2 years or 3 years, and then she was stoned to death. And then she leaves the body, goes up into spirit, reunites with her beloved, and they talk about, well, how was that for you? what kind of strategy did you learn? Would you do that again? And so she decided, of course, at that point, okay, yes, let's do it again, but let's go to a more advanced culture. Let's, wait, another 100 years or so. And so they were born in Europe, and she became, again, very educated, another teacher, another leader, but in a more of a modern culture, she was able to freely teach and shine and show her abilities. And then, unbeknownst to her, at age 39, she met him. She says, "Where have you been all my life?" And but then it was like, "Oh, we're back together." And it was a soul contract that when she left in another time, at this time, she would return, and they would have this wonderful teaching opportunity yet again. That same kind of age thing pops up, and I'm very interested in time. I'm an astrologer also. And by the way, one of the interesting things I would be very curious about are whether that be a near-death experience or a mystical experience or um, uh, a special unfolding or an opening of consciousness. What were the planets doing at that time? Was it a Neptune transit? Was it like the inspiration of the planet Uranus right over the top of your sun? That's I find very curious. In fact, I think that people can plan more mystical experiences, awakening times, and obviously one can like make an appointment with a hypnotist and then have these past life regressions themselves. I mean, you can always do that. But if you can tune it into your astrology chart, your horoscope, and says, "Oh, well, this particular month could be a really great time for you, and you'll be extra sensitive, extra attuned." Well, that would be the best time to do it, I'd say. So anyway, uh, once I had that experience at age 21, it was prophesied, and that was very interesting to me, from a past life. But the prophecy didn't actually happen until 3 years later. And I was no, wait a minute. I had my spiritual experience at 21. I had no clue as what was going on. I was just like a Joe Doe, going out there. And then within 6 months of having this fairy dust over the top of my head, I had lost most of my friends. And I was reading philosophy books. And I was wanting to know, what is this all about? Why are we here? What's the big purpose here? And that took me off on this really interesting journey that brought me to astrology and studying the cosmos and reincarnation, past lives. Because while I was studying philosophy, trying to figure out what happened to me, I came across Hinduism. And Hinduism is a very broad philosophy, a belief system that believes in astrology and karma and reincarnation and the Akashic records. I go, whoa, what are all of these things? Very interesting, very stimulating, very curious. And so then that brought me into, okay, there is this thing called reincarnation. We do have past lives, they say. But is that true? So then I had an appointment myself with a hypnotist. And sure enough, I had a recollection of a past life in ancient Greece. Wow, I thought, isn't that cool? Isn't that great? And at that point, that person, also age 21, was invited to lead a very special ceremony in a temple in ancient Greece, and that opened up his whole career. So again, special time right there. When I was going through the philosophy and studying and trying to put the pieces together, I ended up in London, and I went to a spiritualist church. Have you heard about them?
Yes, I have.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So yeah, the spiritualist churches, they're almost like a regular Christian church, except the minister give psychic readings from the podium, and that's pretty cool. So anyway, I went to a couple of different services and then met this one particular fellow who was a well-known gifted psychic. And we got together, we had an appointment, and he says, well, I'm talking with your grandfather on your mother's side. And I'll tell you, at that point, I was 24. That was the only grandparent who had passed away, my mother's father. So it's like, okay, you got that right. And then he says, well, your grandfather says he would not have approved of what you're doing when he was alive. But now, as he's up here, he totally gets it, and he encourages you to go further. Not only that, but in 1 month, you will have a special visitation. And I go, cool, bring it on. I'm ready. So here was a gifted psychic telling me in London that I was going to be having this visitation. Cool. So sure enough, it's not like I tried to force it. It's like I was just in my flat in London doing a meditation. And suddenly, in the space, filling up half of the room was an angel. And it was a download of inspiration, awareness, a gift of spirit, another mystical experience that in comparison with that fairy dust when I was 21, it was like, wow, this was like way up higher on yet a great other level. And the name of the angel was Zeus. And I was a bit shocked with that, even though I was, fond of, Greek philosophy, and I already knew that I had a Greek life. I didn't expect that or that name, but the wisdom just came in, and it was kind of a download, and again, a redirection of my life. And overnight, I became a vegetarian. It was the desire for meat disappeared. I was not a meat eater, just boom, like that. And I was a vegetarian for 25 years. It wasn't until much later that my body didn't quite, fit into it, or it was time for yet another change. But with that inspiration and direction and a twist, in consciousness, that within a month after that, I had gone back to the United States. I had discovered a book on Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet. You heard of him?
Oh, yes, I've heard of Edgar Cayce.
Yeah, yeah, very inspired. And yet another, psychic, a relatively simple person, a Sunday school teacher, and he had so many insights. When he was initially put into a hypnotic trance, leaving his body, and then getting in attuned to the cosmos and to the great wisdom and so forth. Well, I was so taken with that and the wisdom right there that I just, stayed in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which is where the Edgar Cayce Foundation is. And I stayed there for quite a few years, just studying that, at the same time finishing up my degrees over there that you had mentioned before at Old Dominion University, getting my bachelor's and master's degree. And at the same time, becoming accidentally a professional hypnotherapist. I just did it as a hobby. And I thought it was really cool, for me to experience it and to share that with other people. But then the next thing I know, I had people saying, well, I actually had another experience a year ago with a professional, and I got much deeper with you. And I go, oh, one can do this as a career. And so kind of an accidental astrologer, accidental hypnotherapist. And so my direction was set. I didn't know about that. Years later, I put all my, well, let's say not all, but many of my perspectives together into a 2-volume series on the larger picture of soul groups, relationships, journeys. I had mentioned, those times that things happen and how it all fits together. And so the how does this show up?
Oh, there we go. We see it.
Inner Journeys, Cosmic Sojourns, 2 volumes, and it's a lot of work went into this after maybe 30 years worth of calculations and clients. And I recognized at some point after doing this, maybe for 10, 15 years, that I was like a spiritual midwife to aid people into birthing the understanding, the awareness, the consciousness of the soul that animates us within. And what a privilege that is to aid people to connect to their higher selves. And it's always there. And sometimes when we have those near-death experiences or a mystical experience or out of body sort of thing, we're much closer, of course, to that part of ourselves, but it's always there. And one of the interesting things about the work I do, that as a hypnotist, you get a person into an altered state of awareness, kind of separate them from the everyday consciousness so that then they can tune in to the spark, to the wisdom, that is always there, kind of like watching us, over our shoulders, hoping for the best for us, sometimes frustrated that they're just, those humans are not getting it. It's like we have to wake them up. And as you know, from near-death experiences, some people have to die or almost die to wake up. And, that's quite intense. It's very interesting. I read Raymond Moody, gosh, way back in the 1980s. So very aware of the near-death experiences. I personally have not had mine in this life. But in past lives I had. And having these opportunities to help people to, again, get away from the everyday consciousness, get in tune, get in touch with your higher self, with your soul, because that's the part that knows the most about who we are, where we have come from, the wonderful spiritual realms and higher levels of spirit, our soul groups, our soul mates, twin souls, assignments, and then, of course, the classic cause and effect of karma. If you did something in a past life, there's going to be a repercussion at some point, and it may be in this life here too. So basically, I've aided and enjoyed helping people go to many deaths. So I've seen many deaths. I've been there sitting by people dying, but not having a near-death experience, having a death experience, and that was it. And leaving the body, and so many variations of what happens after one dies. Sometimes the soul chooses to hang around, because it's curious, or there's a heartfelt desire. I care about my family. How are they doing? They're sad. They shouldn't be sad because I feel pretty good. Or they may take off. I mean, boom, up into spirit land and says, "I'm out of here." Like this earth thing. What a drag that's been. But then other times where people turn into ghosts after a death, when it was like on a battlefield, or it was a shock, or they were totally not in agreement in a conscious manner, not in agreement with how they died or when they died, and they're not going to leave. So they hang around, and I've come across ghosts, walking around for a long time in the woods, in quiet places, in a field, sometimes in the water where they drowned, and sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, just kind of like brooding, some of them. And one could ask, why would God, why would spirit allow such a thing? Because we have free will. And if we want to stick around, we can stick around. If we want to, take off, then it's time to take off. But sometimes the emotions, depression, grief, is so strong that it accompanies us after death. And then we're stuck there brooding or grieving after we left the body. And it could be for a long time until at some point, they say free will, you can stay, you do whatever you want. But at one point, there's going to be probably somebody from their soul group or, the spirit guide, the guardian angel will say, I think it's about time. If you've spent a lot of time out there, you're not really progressing. And so sometimes a messenger spirit is sent. Sometimes it's a loved one. It could have been, the person's partner when they were in that last life. And sometimes it's just a messenger, and that's all they have to do, And usually a light comes to that forlorn soul, and then a vibrational awareness, a little bit like fairy dust over the top of their heads. And then they go, whoa, okay. I guess it's time to leave. And they move on. And at that point, they can meet the great elders, the teachers, the guides, putting various pieces of the puzzle together and understanding the cause and the effect, that they have to deal with at many times in their lives. So basically, Tia, that's it in a nutshell, of what I've been doing for 40 years.
Well, that's a lot. And remarkable stories about some of your clients and the things they were able to remember about their past lives and yours as well. And I'm interested in this past life regression. What does that feel like when you're going through it? Does it feel like a dream or a memory or like you're truly back in that life? Tell me about that.
Yes, it's a little bit like, some people are naturally gifted mathematicians, and they're just like really good with math. And other people's like, what day is it? And the same thing goes when if we can really leave our body, leave our consciousness, um, then our soul is always there and wise and connected and, aligned with higher spirit. And then we can really have a great understanding. But there's other people who, they're stuck in their body. In fact, even when I had that out of body experience when I was 17, I'd have to say that probably for years after that, there was a reaction that I must not leave the body. I mean, it was like imperative because this must mean I'm dead and I didn't want to be dead. But so there's various things that can hold us back that stops us. But there are certain ways, means, methods, processes that individuals can go through to step by step and in a very nurturing, caring way, leave our persona, our present self, to move off into, our higher selves. And that's the part that has the greater wisdom. And once there, I've had all kinds of reactions to some people describing like, okay, it's very vague, and I see kind of a shadowy figure 20 feet away. Is it male? Is it female? It could be that, that misty, But then I've had others who they get into the personality and their voices change. And I remember this one woman who was living on an island in the Atlantic, and she just loved boats. She loved the marine life and so forth. I take her into a past life, and she was a guy. She was a man 300 years ago, and he was a salty dog. her voice changed and she started cussing. And he then, was in my room and I was talking with this guy. Okay, so everything in between from kind of like, okay, it's kind of a feeling, or I'm not getting so many clear pictures, but it feels like I'm outside in a meadow. To other people, like they are there. That personality is right here, connected and tuned in. Such a variety of experiences. And sometimes one could say that if you are really focused upon meditation, spirituality, reading the books and so forth, you should be a better subject. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes people who are just absolutely not into it, but they happen to hear that I'm in town, and for a curiosity's sake, I wonder what I was in a past life. No background, no preparation, and boom, wow, they are a great subject, and they really feel all kinds of things. There was this other client that I had, and she was one of those teenagers who cut herself. So she had, lots of blade, cuts upon her both of her arms. And she goes back into a life also as a sailor, as a trader, going from the Europe over to India. And he was off on one of his trips, and his wife and daughter died. And he felt so guilty, and thought, well, even though this is my career, this is how I made my money, I was not there when they died. He was just devastated. So he gets onto another ship, another job, but he's not conscious. He's just not really aware. And then he's finds himself in a bazaar in Saudi Arabia, and just one of those colorful, marketplaces with all of the interesting items. And then he notices that there's a wonderful collection of knives and scimitars and swords. And aren't they fascinating? And that was the end of the session. You got kind of blurry after that. But we found out once the body left that past life as that sailor and was floating in the spirit world, reunited with his wife and child again as souls, as spirits, boy, was that a wonderful reunion. But then there was this sense of, okay, we didn't see it. I didn't show you it. I didn't want to bring that awareness or that memory back, but he found a knife and he killed himself. And now, of course, in the present life, this, the young teenager, she was now in her mid-20s when she met me. But as a teenager, that sense of loss, it was the same age that his daughter was when she died, and she started cutting herself and being fascinated with sharp objects. Cause and effect, so interesting.
And it's interesting that you said it didn't really matter the spiritual background of the person, that sometimes they would have a remarkable experience even if they're not a meditator or this is all brand new to them. So it shows that spirituality, spirit really can't be measured by science. It doesn't have any hard and fast rules. It just does what it does when it does it. So
Yeah,
very interesting.
exactly.
And you talked a little bit about soul groups as well. Can you go a little bit more into that in detail? I'm interested to know um, more about soul groups. Who our soul groups are? Are we with them for all eternity? Are we with them for a period of time, even though time doesn't truly exist? And is there a way that we can recognize who's in our soul group while we're here in this physical realm? Is there a process we can move through to recognize them?
Yes, yes, a very fascinating thing, very much of a big interest for a lot of people because, yeah, we're looking for soulmates, we're looking for companionship, extended family, and so forth. And oh, there is also kind of a family dynamic on the spiritual level, and one can um, uh, start off as like a young star. In fact, I find it very cool that both of us have got a star background, behind us, because not only me as an astrologer, I'm fascinated with the planets and so forth and the stars, but um, when I look at the heavens, there are star clusters, there are galaxies, there are binary stars, and they are reflections of different types of soul groups. And there are some soul groups that really are clustered together, and it's a tight bunch. Could be 30, 40, 50, 100, souls, and they all are vibrating at a particular color spectrum level, but also an interest level, as in science, creation, mathematics, um, music as expression that's connected with communication. I mean, so many interesting things that they're doing as study groups, because they're constantly learning in spirit and in hopefully bringing that knowledge to them back here. And by the way, up there in spirit, they recognize time as a dimension. And there are some places, some dimensions in which there is no time. And Edgar Casey said that we here on the earth, we are dealing with three dimensions: time, space. And when he says space, it's more like, imagine like this box, this cube, that's space, mass, so that's a dimension also. That's like right here, you know. So that's a dimension of being here in the physical world, two dimensions. The third dimension is patience. That's wild.
So,
Yes.
and patience has to do with time as well.
Exactly. Right. Right. I guess you have to have patience working with time, but patience as a dimension. Wow, that really brings it into a whole other dimension instead of like a uh, like a good trait or a character trait or something like that. But anyway, back to the cosmic perspectives. There are a bunch of binary stars, and there can be some souls who are just focused upon two, and they're into dyads. They're into comparisons, yin yang, comparing light, dark, duos, and things like that, because they're vibrating with that dual star in the sky. And when they come into the earth plane, they would probably just find that one other person that creates the two, and that is their one soulmate. But I think that's kind of a small group. There's a lot more who in that binary star, there could be, here's a two, here's a two, here's another two. And so we know them, but we really still are closer to our dyad. But if something happens and that person leaves or dies or something like that, then they can vibrate into a new relationship with another person from their soul group that was also a dyad. But you look up into the sky, and then there's these clusters of stars, and that is probably a place where there's the souls cluster, and so they all think as a group. And so people who are having serial monogamy, many different relationships, or polyamory, where they're in love with more than one person at a time, they may be connected to a cluster, a group dynamic, and so they're more happier let's say, when there's lots of people around. Whereas there's others who, in a binary or maybe a solar thing separate, they like their alone time. They're not social. They're antisocial sometimes, but it's okay. So as many clusters or alignments of the stars in the sky, those are the types of relationships. Those are the types of soul groups that there are. And we can start off with the classic family where we as young souls, and there is a development in the soul world, young souls, middle souls, older souls. We start off as young souls, of course, in a nursery and learning, education, and uh, and those groups that can also be a soul group of you're just all kind of growing together. And then there comes a time, just like in parallel in our own life here on Earth, you get to a point where you graduate from high school or college and you take off and then you go and find another place. You move away and you have grown, you have sometimes outgrown your family, and then you go to another place and you meet yet another group. And there's a parallel with that in spirit, so that people in their family group, the primary growth group, they hang around for thousands of years, and then they grow, and then it's time to move into a special study group, and other like-minded souls join them into a new cluster, a new group, a new family, and then they start hanging out with that group for maybe a long time too.
So are you saying, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this clearly. Are we the stars or the
No,
stars representations?
the star representation and almost like a similar vibration and a representation that, if there's a duo star or a star cluster, it's a just a similar thing, that we too as souls can be a dual, we can be just a solitary, we can be in a cluster. It's a vibration. However, now when you don't have the body and you're just pure soul, what's stopping you from going inside of a star? Right? And I believe that most of those stars out there, including our very own sun, is a gathering place for souls. And of course, you can't burn when you don't have a body, and you can fly and you can float and you can move. But what a great vibration that is. And when I think of the sun, for instance, our very own sun, it is a relay station of God here. And the light that it represents, it shines and warms. I mean, without the sun, that's it here for Earth, for us. And so it is the local life giver.
Okay. So there's some things that I want to unpack there. That's very interesting. How are our souls attracted to these areas like the sun? Is it because of the light that they give off?
We as souls with free will, we can go where we want, we can learn where we want, but there is a constant encouragement, very much like, stars are born, there are baby stars out there, and similar souls are born, and then we grow. And as a parallel to what's happening upon Earth, souls can continue to develop in awareness, consciousness, wisdom, compassion, etc. And then you go into a place where you can then be a guide yourself. You can be a spirit guide for others as you progress. And then you even progress past that into like the elders, the librarians, the time holders, the keepers of the Akashic records. There's many different arenas, specialties that can happen in the spirit world. And we have, as free will, we can choose to go, in many different directions. But our ultimate goal is to expand, to grow, and to reunite with pure spirit. which is God, which is everything.
Does the light from the sun or the stars, does that have anything to do with the light at the end of the tunnel that's sometimes seen in a near-death experience?
I do believe that. Yes, yes. And I've had some souls when they leave the body, they end up floating in space and everything's kind of like black or dark, with a couple of different lights, far away, and they're just hanging out in space and they just like it there. So a lot of it is personal preference, desire for variety of experiences, but being welcomed back to the light, that is a high vibration. That is, spirit and wisdom and love and compassion. And so, yeah, I think, in our little solar system, our sun is that relay station of God, inviting, especially those lost souls or hurt souls or confused souls, come get warm, peace, wisdom, acceptance, and maybe a download of wisdom, and especially for those near-death people, after the download, get back in there. You're not finished.
Have you heard of the soul trap where some believe that if you go into the light, you're going to be recycled and spit back out on earth? Have you heard of that?
Um, I have heard of that, and my experience doesn't really, encourage that. Because we have free will, we can do various things. There are advisors, spirit guides and the soul groups and things like that that say, well, you may not like this, but because of what you did in Greece, you have to go back, you got to pay your debts, as it were, because there is like this divine um, equilibrium connected with karma. As you give, so shall you receive. As you do unto others, so shall it be done unto you. And it's like a cosmic law, and we have to deal with things. So sometimes there's, souls who are doing things that they really don't want to do. It's like a sentence, but they ultimately, on a higher level, they know, okay, yeah, I did this, and so I got to make up for it.
So they're
And
agreeing
so,
to it reluctantly.
right. And it says, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this, And so that could feel like, oh, you're being, reprocessed and refocused. But I can say that there is a very rare dynamic that when a soul on the earth, they get off track to a very extremist dynamic. And we're talking about evil. We're talking about, torturing with pleasure. Okay. And when some souls go too much in that direction, there is almost like an interception where they are oftentimes, and I've only had like 3 of these in my life. Okay. But they go into like this ball, this space, and they have to stew. They have to think about it. It is a time out, and it is a redirection. It is a re-vibration, recalibration, because that person, even following free will, we're allowed to do what we want to do. But you went too far. This is not good. It's not good for you. It's not good for others. You become a bit more poisonous. So then there is this separation where this soul, it needs to recalibrate and to reform.
We're running out of time here, but I wanted to see if you have any last words of wisdom for my viewers.
You know, ultimately, both in spirit as well as in our bodies here upon the earth, there is a constant push to grow in understanding, compassion, love, and caring. That's the main thing, because ultimately we are expanding, going back into the one, and that is, that is the ultimate goal. And there are those who have been sidetracked, um, frustrated, lost, angry, some emotion. And there are opportunities for those who have had these awarenesses, who have a greater awareness and experience. And one could call it their assignment, but it's more like a natural, caring intention to help those who have been uh, off on the wrong track, who have lost their way. And sometimes that shows up in marriages, in relationships. There are those, and probably you've met them too, Tia, where you say, well, this is really an odd couple. Like, how did this really, nice woman end up with this jerk? You know, but on a soul level, that higher vibration soul said, it is only through love in a relationship that I'm going to help that lost soul to, get back on track. And you see relationships like that too. And I'd have to say, God bless them, because, thank goodness that they're doing that, because ultimately there is a general desire to leave no one behind, and we all can elevate in spirit and consciousness. And so we are our brother's keeper. We do want and need to aid others to, again, to ascend into the light, into the one, into spirit, into the Godhead.
I absolutely love that. We're all walking each other home. I've heard that before. We're in this together and we're not leaving anyone behind. Love it. That's so beautiful. And the sacrifices that some do make in order to make that possible is incredible. It's um, very generous, to say the least. So, and if my viewers wanted to reach out to you, if they have more questions, they want to order your book, how can they find you?
So I have two websites, and one of them is stephen-poplin.com. And probably on this screen, on my bottom left, I see my name. So stephen-poplin.com. And then that has various things, including I've got a YouTube channel also, and some meditations that I've done, as well as the books. And then there is another website going more towards the astrology, metaphysics, tarot, symbology, counseling, and that is transpersonal, one word, transpersonal.us.
Perfect. And I have one more question for you before we go, because I just thought about this and I want to hear your opinion. Um, when you did your regression, do you remember your afterlife?
Over the years, I've had more than 35 past life regressions and life between life sessions. And so I can't remember like on which one I had, particular awarenesses, but over a period of time, all of the different pieces of the puzzle kind of came together, showing my variety of interests, coming from, recollections from past lives. But I can say that there was one of my earlier recollections of a past life was in what is now called Austria, and I'm very attracted towards Austria today. But I was probably approximately like 500 or 600 AD, so a long time ago, and I was one of these Teutonic warriors, one of those big, like guys, Arnold Schwarzenegger, with a two-handed sword, like just as a warrior, just killing people, and probably as a mercenary. And then at age 30, and here we have these times again, at age 30, he converted to Christianity. And then he started killing people for Jesus.
Oh my goodness.
Of course, that as a recollection, I go, oh my goodness, because periodically I'm watching a movie, and there's a bad guy, right? And I'm sitting there on the couch, and saying, you should just kill him. Just end it, because he's going to cause you problem later on in the movie. And if I didn't know that I had this Teutonic warrior in my background, I go, where did that violent perspective come in? Although it's very efficient. If there's a bad guy, you got to kill him. But it's just a pure kind of knee-jerk reaction. And luckily, I'm not a big burly guy this time. Because we don't need to do that. And besides, been there, done it. Recognizing that there is a cause and effect for that too. And what is a little bit of a surprise is in many different conflicts, there is also an agreement, even before we're born, that you may die in war. And it's not like, oh, what a terrible tragedy. It's like, oh, well, this is from, the 3rd century BC when you were in that tribe, and you're meeting again that karma, that experience. Again, the better that we can find peace, the better that we can move towards forgiveness, the better that we can drop the karma now. We don't have to then go through it again and again and again. You look at, politics today and what's happening in the news, it's like, oh, we're not progressing as good as we should. They're creating negative karma, and they're just going to be meeting it later. Oh, well, they have time, and there's forgiveness. And if you don't do it right this time, then maybe you can do it next time.
And perhaps that's why you're here doing so much goodwill towards others, and helping them find who they truly are to make amends for your past life there.
Yep, yep.
Well, you've been amazing, Stephen. Thank you so much for being my guest. I wish all the very best for you, and I'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Tia, and my best to you too. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.